A tutti, benvenuti. È un grande piacere avere qui la dottoressa Isabelle Régen questa sera e dato che la nostra ospite ci parlerà in inglese, anch'io adesso passo ad un idioma più comprensibile alla nostra ospite e a chiunque ci segua qui e anche online. Good evening. It's a great pleasure to have Isabelle Régen here. It's great to have you in Turin after we met many years when in a different environment at Sheikh Ali in Thebes. And thank you so much for accepting our invitation and for being here presenting us one of the most important, I dare to say, tomb of the so-called late period, presenting us a real encyclopedia of what is kept in an elite tomb. And I'll come back to the topic of the lecture in a minute. Just a few words to present our guest lecturer tonight. Isabelle Régen is an Egyptologist and a former scientific member of the IFAO in Cairo. Her research interest includes, in particular, ancient Egyptian funerary religion. She is the co-director of the French epigraphical mission in the Tomb of Padiamenope, TT33, where she has been working since the creation of the mission in 2004. It is a joint team from the IFAO, Strasbourg and Montpellier University with the support of the Fond Keop pour l'Archéologie. She's in charge of the editio princeps of the two TT33 Netherwords book, the Amduat and the Book of Gates. So, she's going to present us tonight with the honor. She's going to present us tonight the tomb. I see wonderful 3D model behind my back. She's going to present us how TT33 sets within the landscape of the elite tombs. I was reading your abstract and I really liked the definition of a monumental library in stone. And it really is. Those of you who have been so lucky to go and have a visit in the tomb just realize not only the massive architectures but the richness of texts are in there. And the work that the French mission is carrying out is in itself monumental because it is, so as I said, a mission starting in 2004. The goal of the mission and the objective of the mission is the copying, editing and studying of the text of this massive, gigantic tomb. There are more than 2,600 square meters of decorated walls. This gives you the scope of what is happening. Not only that, which is impressive and massive in itself, since 2017, a conservation work has also been added to the mission. So, Isabelle, the floor is yours, and we really thank you for being here, and we're looking forward to hearing what the mission has accomplished.
Buonasera a tutte e tutti. Per prima cosa vorrei ringraziare Christian Greco e Luigi Prada per avermi gentilmente invitata a tenere una conferenza in questo contesto prestigioso del Museo Egizio di Torino. È per me un onore e un grande piacere. Vorrei anche ringraziare Elisa Fanetti per il suo aiuto nell'organizzazione della mia visita. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, in this presentation I propose to talk about the recent work of the French mission in the Theban tomb 33. However, I cannot do so without presenting the tomb, which, as you will see, is gigantic. It is indeed considered one of the largest tombs in Egypt, if not the largest, at least for a private individual. Therefore, I have organized my presentation in two roughly equal parts. The first part will be devoted to a general overview of the tomb and its owner. The second part will deal with the work done and to be done in this monument, and there is a lot of to be done. I cannot begin this presentation of the tomb without saying a word about its place in the European mind, in the European imagination. Indeed, the monumental tomb of the ritualist priest and chief Padiamenope entered the European mind early on. It is known from the end of the 18th century through the testimonies of European travelers. The Description de l'Égypte lists it, as do the Denkmäler of Lepsius. In 1829, while leading the Franco-Tuscan expedition to Egypt, Jean-François Champollion described it as an immense and prodigious excavation which travelers admire under the name of a great syringe. But the earliest known mention of the tomb dates back to 1743, when the English traveler Richard Pocock published his travel diary, in which he gave the very first, albeit rough, plan of the monument. He had visited the tomb 6 years earlier, in 1737. Impressed by his visit to the tomb, he described it as a grotto and an extensive apartment. Now, this is how he interprets Padiamenope's tomb and that of his neighbor Hawa. One would almost imagine that these places were habitations for the living and possibly might be cut under the palaces of the kings of Thebes, if they were not the very palaces themselves, to retire to when they pleased from their tents or other places more exposed to the wind or heat. He thus imagined the tomb as a kind of underground summer residence of the king, where Pharaoh liked to retire when it was too hot or windy. Another traveler, Anton Graf Prokesch-Osten, gives another picture of the tomb. He mentions an endless labyrinth that you may only venture into with a safe guide and a good lighting. To cross the dark thresholds require a certain self-conquest. Like the roll of the sea, the flapping of millions of bats sounds up from the depths, inhabiting these catacombs and fluttering around the intruder in all swarms, often extinguishing his light or crushing against him and polluting the oppressive air in such a way that the strongest nerves can be attacked by it. There are many travelers' testimonies, and my aim here is not to collect them. I propose now to present the monument and its owner, who is not well known, before dealing with the ongoing and future work of the French mission that studies this monument. The tomb of the lector priest Padiamenope dates to the end of the 25th dynasty and the beginning of the 26th, that is to say the 7th century BCE. More precisely, the main part of Padiamenope's career would be situated between 680 and 660 BCE, during the reigns of Taharqa, Tanutamon, and Psammetichus I. However, the name of the king is never mentioned in TD33. Padiamenope is only referring to, in a kind of politically correct litote, to the king of his time. So guess who is the king? Claude Tronecker has suggested that Padiamenope had an influence on the later Napatan rulers, especially in the decoration of their tombs. Tomb TD33 is probably the largest private tomb in Egypt. It is situated on the west bank of Luxor, in the North Asasif necropolis, in front of the temple of Deir el-Bahari. More precisely, the tombs of the North Asasif necropolis are strategically located along the causeway of Hatshepsut's temple, that is to say, on the path of Amun and offerings. Indeed, the beautiful festival of the valley had rituals including Deir el-Bahari temple. During this festival, known since the Middle Kingdom, the procession of god Amun-Ra leaves Karnak to visit the Theban necropolis. This festival still seems to be alive at the end of the Third Intermediate period. Well, Padiamenope himself says that he has chosen to make his tomb, literally a mooring place, in the direction of Karnak. He thus wanted, like his necropolis neighbors, to place himself on the path of the procession of god Amun. We shall see that one of his titles was indeed leader of the festivals of Amun in Karnak. I have to mention here an inscription of a contemporary of Padiamenope, the powerful Monumental, who was the mayor of Thebes and fourth prophet of Amun, and who is also the necropolis neighbor of Padiamenope. The inscription seems to echo the privileged position of the tomb. If I understand correctly this fragmentary inscription, it seems that the god, during a procession, while going up the processional road, the causeway, had revealed to Monumental the location of his future tomb, TT 34. And Monumental immediately set to work. This divine revelation of the location of the tomb is a process known at least since the New Kingdom. In the Asasif necropolis, both in its northern and southern parts, a very small number of privileged people, let's say happy fews, are buried during the Kushite and Saite period. The tomb of the priest Padiamenope is one of barely 15 monumental libraries in stone, and these belong to a Theban elite buried in a reserved place on the path of Amun procession. However, Tomb 33 stands out from the other tombs because of its size, its decorative program, and its prominent location. Indeed, Tomb 33 seems to have been the first tomb that Amun saw on his journey to the necropolis. The effect was theatrical and part of a memorial strategy. Amun's procession was moving up the Hatshepsut causeway. To the left, there was an imposing rock mass, poetically called I-104, served as a visual barrier. When the rock was interrupted, when this height 104 was interrupted, it was the moment when Amun's bar stopped at a resting shrine. And at that very moment, the enormous brick pylon of Padiamenope, about maybe 10 meters high, appeared. This huge pylon was probably covered with white plaster, as can be seen in the tomb of Sheshank. So it was even more visible to the procession coming from Karnak. Within this small elite community, Tomb TT 33 is often considered to offer the most excessive and ostentatious illustration of the construction of the memorial identity of the deceased. Let us judge this by a few evocative measurements before briefly mentioning the decorative program. The tomb of Padiamenope consists of a mud brick enclosure about 105 meters long and 85 meters wide. That represents a floor area of about 9,000 square meters, almost twice the area of Notre-Dame de Paris. In terms of infrastructure, there are 22 rooms spread on 4 levels. The tomb once had 2 pylons and 2 courtyards, but these have now almost completely disappeared. The masonry entrance you see at the back is the entrance to the underground levels. One can imagine an open-air entrance hall. In general, with a few exceptions, the tomb is fully inscribed. The total decorated area was being estimated at about 2,622 square meters. The underground levels cover approximately 1,000 square meters. This 22-room is a library in stone. It is indeed a kind of anthology of Egyptian funerary literature. It could be compared to a kind of Bibliothèque nationale de France for this type of literature. It gathers funerary texts from very different periods. It gives versions that are often clarified and reworked. It also assembles them in a particularly original textual and architectural synthesis. We are therefore faced with clarified texts that allow us to understand older and sometimes more faulty versions. The Osirian of Abydos is clearly one of the main models of the tomb. The special relationship of the Kushites with Abydos is also well known. More, this anthology of funerary literature could have been maybe accessible. The presence of appeals to the living in the deep parts of the tomb leads Claude Tronecker to believe that that part of the tomb could have been accessible during certain festivals and that the text on the walls could have been consulted there. In this theatrical tomb, the highlight of the show was the atypical architecture of room 13, a 15-meter-sided mass that Alexandre Piankov called the Osirian cenotaph. Claude Tronecker proposed to recognize in this massive structure the now disappeared superstructure of the Osirian of Abydos, around which processions could have circulated. The sides of the cenotaph total 15 doors related to parts of the Osirian body and the work of embalmers. More, 22 niches of pair-new chapels contains divine statuettes that seems to be arranged on shelves. Each corner of the cenotaph is protected by a pair of goddesses, so it means 8 goddesses in total. So, who is this man to own such a huge tomb in a most sought-after place? Paradoxically, if the tomb is literally covered by inscriptions, we do like precise information about this man, and especially about his career. His name indicates that he was a local man, perhaps from Ermant. In any case, he was certainly a strong man in Thebes, like his contemporary and necropolis neighbor Mentuemhat. From what is known about him, that is very little, we seem to perceive a powerful figure, close to the king, both an intellectual and a courtier, un courtisan. We may wonder what relationship these two men had with the divine votaress who was supposed to hold political and religious power in Thebes. One may also wonder about the relationship between Padiamenope and Mentuemhat, whose tomb have several points in common. It can be argued that the construction of their tombs was partly, at least, contemporary. Both of these powerful men wanted to have a final resting place worthy of their prestige and their memorial strategy. Was there any form of competition, however a friendly one, between these two figures? We will never know, but the statuary of Padiamenope is similar to, but larger and taller than that of Mentuemhat, as shown by Laurent Coulon and as illustrated by a slide of Claude Tronecker here. In the same way, we can only imagine the noise, the crowd, the dust produced by these building sites, which were spread over several years in the Asasif. We know a dozen of his statues. Well, it is a lot for just one person. And in this respect, recent discoveries made by Frédéric Collin and Cassandre Hartenstein have shown that a sculptor's workshop was set up directly in the courtyard of the tomb. This granite was transported directly and specially from Aswan, which implies considerable logistical means. We know a few members of his family: his mother, his wife, 2 nephews, and on his mother's side, uncles, aunts, and cousins. But his father's name is never mentioned. It is not known whether he had any children. The only children found depicted in the tomb are 2 young boys, probably nephews. They are holding the stick of Padiamenope in a scene reminiscent of the Old Kingdom style. The first is called Padipta, and the name of the second one here is almost entirely lost. Another element reminiscent of the Old Kingdom is the epithet of his wife, the pensioner to her husband. As far as I know, it occurs only during the Old Kingdom. A maternal uncle named Jed Iman Iri appears in the outer frame of door 5-1. Why is he highlighted in the scene of this door? More, his uncle also holds the same titles of ritualist priest and chief of Nerbet, 2 titles actually held by Padiamenope. Could this uncle have played a role in Padiamenope's education? Generally speaking, the importance of the maternal uncle in the education of a child is known in African civilization. According to Dimitri Mex, it is a cultural trait of this civilization. But of course, we are reduced to hypothesis, and probably we will never know exactly why Padiamenope emphasized this family member in his tomb. In addition to his family members, what best informs us about Padiamenope are his almost 50 titles. But the most important title in terms of real administrative responsibility is Seshnesu and Refether, that is to say, the private secretary to the king. Once again, a title which is attested as early as the Old Kingdom. It is therefore an archaic title at the time of Padiamenope, and the personal scribe of the king's archives means, once again, a kind of private secretary, a kind of minister to the king. And I will add that one of the titles that best testify the trust that the king placed in Padiamenope is perhaps that of leader of the feast of Amun-Ra in Karnak, because it is the king who delegates this function to him. But of course, the title that helps explain the, let's say, literary sophistication of the decorative program of the tomb is that of ritualist priest and chief. It presents him as an intellectual, as a scholar. And indeed, ritualist priest is the short title of Padiamenope in his tomb. It also seems that Padiamenope's career has been built on a logic of court, of courtship. This may explain, as an intimate to the king, how this man could have disposed so enormous resources to plan his final residency. One can imagine that he excelled at court in oratory and in the scriptorium, in the knowledge of texts and scriptural practices. As you can see, there are still a lot of gray areas about this figure. So, I will speak now about the work of the French mission, and I will start with the work done, the recent work done. Created in 2004, the French mission in the tomb of Padiamenope has the initial objective of copying, editing, and studying the texts of this gigantic monument. The epigraphic mission was initiated in 2006 by Claude Tronecker and I, following the inventory, photography, and removal in 2004-2005 of the antiquities placed in Store 33. It was not a tomb at this time, it was a store, a place of storage. So they called the tomb Marzentala Tutalatin, so it was storage 33. This project is the result of a collaboration between the IFAO, the University of Montpellier, and the University of Strasbourg. I will add that 3 epigraphic projects have been supported by the LabEx Archimède in Montpellier. I will start with the restoration project. Since 2017, a conservation, restoration, and sanitation project has been added to the text study project. It is supported by the Fonds Khéops pour l'Archéologie in Paris, whose president is Christine Gallois. She is the coordinator of the project with Sophie Duberson from the Musée du Louvre, who supervises the work. Before 2017, we had carried out occasional restoration operations, particularly in 2012 in Room 5, with a team of local restorers from the Ministry of Antiquities. The cleaning of the walls was spectacular. We were really enthusiastic. Unfortunately, it soon became apparent that we had chosen, by chance, the easiest room to clean. Applying the same techniques in other rooms was less successful. Thus, it soon became necessary to carry out an expert mission to determine which restoration techniques would be the most effective. In addition, the clean walls were darkening again, suggesting the presence of semi-volatile particles. Numerous cleaning tests were carried out by Sophie Duberson using different techniques. It appeared that micro-sandblasting on the left was much more effective than chemical pads. The expert mission concluded that the rooms showed very different levels of degradation, so different cases to be treated differently. In the end, the technical issues are so numerous that the tomb could be used as a restoration school because almost every type of degradation is present in the tomb. In the program that was then drawn up by experts from different backgrounds and institutions, it became clear that the first priority was to clean up the tomb and to deal with the pollution of the indoor air, which was particularly heavy in VOCs, volatile organic compounds. Similarly, establishing the climatic profile of the tomb was essential. Without going into technical details, highly irritating and toxic VOCs, particularly in the burial chamber, located some 20 meters underground, had to be removed. The air analysis in the tomb was supervised by Stéphane Moularin, and he specialized in the analysis of indoor pollution. It showed that some of the VOCs were common to those emitted by the organic products used for mummification and embalming. In other words, the air of the tomb had something in part similar with mummy smell. To remove VOCs, in 2019, an air extraction system was installed from the entrance of the tomb to the burial chamber. A sensor was placed in the burial chamber, and it was read twice a day to record the VOC levels. The resumption of ventilation in 2021 led to a further decrease in VOCs. At the same time, the cleaning of Room 1 was carried out by Simone Nanucci with the help of Héloïse Smet and many Egyptian workers. They work under difficult conditions as the excavation operation raised a significant amount of dust in a closed environment. In addition, the excavation also contributed to the increase of VOCs in the tomb. It would be interesting to know whether the next campaign would have reduced the VOCs again. In the meantime, the members of the mission continue to respect the health measures recommended by Stéphane Moularin, particularly the wearing of a filter mask with cartridge, and in certain cases, the wearing of a kind of forensic type suit, you know, the white suit, forensic type one. The rubble removal in the first 3 rooms, led by Simone Nanucci, is crucial before cleaning the walls. Currently, the cleaning of 2/3 of room 1 is finished. During the last 2 seasons, in 2019 and 2021, thousands of decorated fragments from walls, ceiling, and pillars of room 1 were excavated. This brings me to the assessment of the epigraphic project. The fragments excavated in room 1 allow Silvia Einaudi to identify new chapters of the Book of the Dead, originally inscribed on the pillars of room 1, and also to get an idea of the vignettes referring to chapter 1. The scene of chapter 1 has retained its vivid colors, and for us, it is the first occurrence of green color in TT33. The study of the vignettes in chapter 1 and 17 of the Book of the Dead has confirmed the chronological proximity between the Tomb of Padiamenope and that of Karakamun, TT 223, a Kushite period tomb located in the South Asasif necropolis. I refer you to Sylvia's article in the online journal Enim 15 to 2022. It is difficult to summarize here all the progress, modest or more substantial, made by the team. We have made a lot of progress in understanding this monument, how it functions, and about the decorative program, the models he used, its influence, etc. This has been the subject of numerous articles or conference proceedings. So I am staying here at a factual and general level so as not to repeat too much of what was already been written. The photographic coverage essential to the epigraphic work is provided by Gaël Paulin of the IFAO Photographic Service in collaboration with Mohamed Gaber of the IFAO Topography Service. Auto photographs are available for the rooms highlighted in red on the plan. So that is for photographic coverage. And now, what is the status of the photogrammetric coverage? The entire tomb has been surveyed by Olivier Onésime, formerly a topographer and photogrammetrist at the IFAO, and only entrance hall remains to be surveyed, but the presence of antiquities still stored in the entrance must be solved to allow the complete and accurate survey. Here is now the attribution of the text to the epigraphist, to the epigraphers. To put it simply, almost the entire tomb has been at least hand-copied. The rooms are in a very different states of conservation. The walls of some of the rooms are more or less collapsed, more or less soiled, more or less looted, so we are dealing with very different cases. There is often a great deal of puzzle work with the fragments of the wall. Therefore, the main part of text was hand-copied. The next logical step is the digital facsimile with Adobe Illustrator. So here, progress is currently more limited. To date, the digital surveys completed are the Book of Caverns by Daniel Vernin. It is located in rooms 17, 18, and 19. And he published in 2019 a book with the drawing of the scenes, only the iconography of the scenes, with the text in typography, and also he gives the text layout of the Book of Caverns. But he plans to produce a full facsimile for publication at the IFAO. So the Book of Caverns and the Book of the Gates and the beginning of the Amduat, they are noted in rooms 20 and 13, in rooms 12 and 13, and the drawings were made by Pauline Calassou and myself, We made the complete survey of the Book of the Gates. It's about 100 meters square of drawing, and I still have about 270 meters square to draw, so still a lot of work. As a preview, here are the best preserved parts of the Book of the Gates, so I'll show you kind of a type of facsimile. So I guess they will be the subjects of several volumes at the IFAO, well, at least we hope. In addition, I would like to mention the international conference held in Montpellier in July 2022. It was devoted to the decoration of the Asasif tombs, and several papers concern TD33 as well as other tombs. The proceedings will be published in the Senim collection in Montpellier, probably in 2024. And I hope the videos of the papers will also be made available online. To conclude the perspectives, the prospects, in a few sentences and 3 more slides. First of all, for epigraphy and then for a restoration. So we need to continue the orthophotographic coverage to complete the encopy of the few missing texts and to publish the digital facsimiles, mainly, I think, in the IFAO. To continue the treatment of the inscribed fragments, and there are a lot because many walls collapsed. Some paleographical studies by Sylvia Einaudi and Daniel Werning are initiated. And personally, I would like to continue the study of the pink granite gate, now in Medinet Habu, which probably came from the entrance of the tomb, TT33, so I hope to continue the study. And now the prospects for the conservation, restoration, and sanitation mission. We have to continue the air extraction and to monitor the climatic environment of the tomb, because not all the problems of pollution are solved. And it will be necessary to complete the excavation of rooms 1, 2, and 3 with a double objective. Of course, to reconstruct the 8 pillars in room 1, and then to install a clean and passable floor for, I hope, for future visitors. And last, to carry out micro sandblasting tests, maybe in autumn 2023. These tests are being made possible thanks to a sponsorship from the Kercher Company and the collaboration of the Louvre Museum with the support of the Fonds Khéops pour l'Archéologie. It is both a sponsorship of equipment and a sponsorship of skills. In spite of custom issues, the success of this micro sandblasting test could open up a major restoration project for TD33. One last word. As you will have understood, if I present this work alone today, there is a whole team working on this project, and would like to thank them all, as well as our institutional and financial supporters who make the impossible possible. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Isabelle, for sharing with us this impressive and amazing work. I don't know how you can sleep at night thinking of the 100 meters still to go and how much work is involved in there. It's really impressive in all different levels, taking the responsibility to deal with such a huge monument and the responsibility also for conservation. I have a question concerning the microblasting of sand that you are gonna extend and see what the results are doing. So do you plan, if this is working and giving good result, to phase also, I suppose, the way of documenting, because after you clean the wall, so you're applying that on parts of the tomb where you were not able to see exactly what is behind, and then inshallah after this miracle blasting it will improve.
Hopefully we will be able to conduct these tests in next autumn, but there are some custom issues at the moment. Of course, we will. Sophie Duberson will lead some tests in undecorated zones, and then maybe we can hope, if it's okay, if the technique is well adjusted, to carry out some tests on decorated zones, but it's very, very uncertain for the moment. I think it will be a long process.
Well, I believe everything is going to be long.
Yes,
this is more
but
than...
you can't finish if you don't start, so
yes, exactly.
You need to start.
This is more than lifetime lasting, but it shows how important is documentation work, because how fundamental it is, and to do documentation and conservation and publication of tests which otherwise would be completely unknown.
And of course, we will carry out microsandblasting tests according to the laws of the ministries of antiquities and according to their recommendations and in respect of what they recommend for the work.
Do you do the copying in scale 1:1? Do you work on, you're implementing also digital epigraphy, or how you're proceeding at the moment?
Well, the facsimiles of the Book of the Gates is finished, so now I began to draw the Amduat, which is even longer. So the scale is determined by the IFAO volume, if it's published in the MIFAO, so there is a certain size, so you have to, because if you don't take into account the size of the book, or the final book, there could be a problem, of the line which is too clear or too dark. So when you start to draw, you need to think from the beginning about the size of your line on Adobe Illustrator.
Yes, because otherwise you would lose all details if you shrink it too much. Are there any questions about this amazing work? Yes.
Thank you, Isabelle, for this beautiful lecture. I've seen the tomb, not in person, but from the plans, and we talked about it many times, but I'm still amazed by the size and how many texts are kept in it. So I have a silly question, but I was wondering, considering the size, do you have evidence for the tomb to have been planned as a whole, as it is, from the beginning, or do you see, do you have hints here and there of the tomb being expanded at some point or redeveloped? And a second question is there any way to assess where did they start from in terms of decoration? Obviously, yeah, excavating it, they started from the beginning, from the entrance, but decorating it, are there texts that appear from the paleography and etc., older than others? Thank you.
For the first question, I have the impression it was planned as a whole, because if you compare the plan of Padiamenope's tomb to the plan of Montouemhat, you see that the plan of TT33 is really a beautiful synthesis of a huge amount of texts, but in a single corridor, But if you take if you look at the plan of TT34, so the plan of the tomb of Montouemhat, you see that there is a corridor and many side chambers with many different texts, like, you know, a kind of library, and you put the book here and then here, and in many side chambers. That's not the kind of plan of TT33. Everything, I have the impression, of course, I don't have the proof, the piece of evidence. Everything is in a single corridor, and the circulation is very clear. You can't, of course, it can be seen as a kind of labyrinth, but actually the circulation is very clear. There is only one way. So I think it was conceived as a whole. But it's true that we have in room 19, and then in the pit 20, we have, you know, in room 19 we have the beginning of an excavation. So I don't know if it was related to the tomb or not. And in the same chamber, you take the pit, you go down at the end of the pit, and there is another room, room 20, which is unfinished. And I have no idea if it is related to the tomb. But maybe Padiamenope's plan to make a bigger tomb. I don't know. And the second question was? Well, at least I can say that there are unfinished parts in the tomb, and for example, in room 12 and 13, it's the ceiling which are unfinished. So I guess that the ceiling were done at the end, maybe, but I'm afraid I can't say more. I don't have any more elements to answer more precisely to your questions.
I believe that also the paleographic studies that you are studying,
yes.
You were mentioning that Sylvia is starting doing some paleography, will also give some light about
Sure.
at least different hands and the way of proceeding also in the work. So this adds, of course, another very interesting layer. Some other questions or curiosity? Well, then, thank you again for your amazing lecture and showing the very impressive work you are doing, and we're all looking forward for the new library coming. I mean, we need new shelves in our library to house all the amount of work that you will publish, and that's really amazing. So thank you again.
Thank you.